All right. Hello, everyone. We are here today to chat about LangSmith, which is something we're really excited about to launch. I will mostly let Ankush and Will do most of the talking. We have Charles here to help ask questions, help guide us through, help explain things, help with everything really. Minor logistics before we get started. This is being recorded. We'll put it on YouTube later. And if you have questions during the presentation, feel free. I think the best place for them is in the little question box on the right. So there's a little chat section, and then below that there's a box with a question mark in it. If you put things there and then upvote ones that you want to get answered, we'll return to those at the end. If we see interesting ones real time, we'll pull those in as well. But yeah, super excited to be doing this. And with that, I'll hand it off to Ankush, who will be talking mostly.
Awesome. Thanks, Harrison. So I'm Ankush, co-founder of LangChain. Really excited to share LangSmith with you all. Thanks, Charles, for joining as well. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen and we can get started. Okay, so this is like the landing page for LangSmith. Before I dive into more detail, I just want to point out the docs. So we have like pretty comprehensive docs here. They're on docs.smith.langchain.com. Everything that we'll go through is pretty well documented. And if there are any questions, we've also added to Discord a support channel. So if you run into any issues, have any feedback, would love to hear from you there. So
yeah, Ankush, maybe. So I've saw the blog post and I saw the Twitter threads and stuff, but maybe like a high level of what LangSmith is offering.
Totally. Yeah. So LangSmith is a unified platform that helps developers debug, test, monitor, and evaluate their LM applications. We've made it very easy to integrate LangSmith with LangChain, but don't require that you use it. So we also offer a TypeScript and Python SDK that offers a lower level API that allows you to connect your application with LangSmith. There are a variety of features that we've included in LangSmith to help with all of this. I can walk through them one by one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to get started with that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So when you log into LangSmith, the first thing you'll want to do is create an API key. I've already created a bunch, arguably too many. So then you log in, and then you'll see the homepage, which has projects and datasets. I'll go through these one by one. But projects are nothing more than collections of runs that you've executed and logged to the system.
Mm-hmm.
Datasets are where all of your datasets live and all of the runs that you've executed against your datasets live. I'll walk through this in a bit more detail now. So we've added this walkthrough.
Actually, some questions at the high level of that interface, maybe. So like, what should I be thinking of as the scale for my project? Should that be like one project for an entire application, one project for like each LLM powered feature? Like what kind of scale are these projects and runs at?
Yeah, so we've left it like intentionally flexible right now. We've seen people create a new project for each different for different applications. We've seen people create projects for different days. We've seen people create projects for different stages of their application, like maybe a dev project, a staging project, a production project. So it really depends on the use case. As we start to see people using projects in more opinionated ways, we can also reflect this in the platform.
Yeah. And then how big should it, like a run that's like a series of turns between a user and a dialogue agent would be like, that's a run, right? So like that's a term for in the LangChain tracing library. The like run is like an execution from end to end rather than like a single step.
Yeah, so it depends on how it depends on like how it's implemented, but usually like each step of the conversation will be its own run.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Cool. All right, awesome. So just walking through this notebook really quickly. So this is linked from the docs as well. We have this walkthrough notebook. We have some prerequisites that you need to set up, like log in, create an account, create an API key. To run this notebook, you'll also need an OpenAI API key and a SERP API key because we're creating agents that use the search tool and the OpenAI tool. I'll initialize my environment. Here, I'm setting let me scroll through my, let me try to hide my API key, which I'll delete after this. So you'll need to set a few environment variables. LangChain tracing v2, you'll need to set that to true. The LangChain project is the project that you want to log to. Here I'm using tracing walkthrough suffixed by unique ID. There's the LangChain endpoint. In your versions of LangChain, you actually don't even need to specify this. So if you specified an API key, things will automatically get logged to api.smith.langchain.com. Cool. And then I'll initialize the client here. This is the client that we offer as part of the LangSmith library. Here I'll create an agent. I'm creating an agent with chat OpenAI chat model. I'm giving it two tools: SERP API to allow it to search the internet, and LLM Math to allow it to do more complex calculations.
So with the LangSmith client, that's something that kind of like lives the whole time that the chain is executing, like maybe many runs are happening, and one client is responsible for like logging all of those runs.
That's correct. Yep.
Got it.
Cool. And so what I'll do now is I'll kick off a bunch of agent runs concurrently. These are just kind of made up inputs, really. You can use any type of agent, any type of chain, any series of inputs. We should see them traced here in real time. The ones that are marked complete are complete. The ones that have this little running man symbol indicate that the run is still in progress, and then the exclamation mark indicates an error with the run, not the system itself. So here you can see 10 agent runs that I just kicked off, and they're traced here in this project. Here you can see a bunch of useful things to track your runs. You can see the overall latency. You can see the token counts per run. We also allow you to send up arbitrary tags to allow you to better organize your runs. In this case, we've just sent zero-shot React description as a tag to every run. You'll see the name of the LangChain object that you're using, in this case, agent executor, the input and the output. You also have these filters that you can use to better query your runs. So if you only want to see runs that are successful, you can click on success. If you only want to see error runs, you can do that as well. If you want to see runs with specific tags, you also have that capability. We also allow you to filter on things like latency, token counts, time. In addition to tags, we also let you send up arbitrary key value pairs, so you can filter on those as well. We have this like custom query language that's more that's documented in the docs that I showed earlier. So you can use these to create custom query strings.
Nice. And then so 2 questions. One, the like tag thing, is that something that I should be using to like split out things that are all like runs that are all within a single project? Or is that something that I should be using to be able to like collate information across multiple projects so that I can find all my zero-shot React runs across every project that I'm doing, versus like flagging them with like, oh, this is a user who is in our Discord front end. and that's what I can use when I'm like debugging or monitoring a single project?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Right now in the UI, you can't search for runs across multiple projects, even if they have the same tag. You can do that, I believe, with the SDK, but we haven't added that capability in the UI yet. Like tags, are really meant to be used however you find them useful. We found them useful for organizing pieces like different runs within our project.
And then could you say a little bit more about the like key value pair logging? That's like if I want to add like arbitrary additional metadata that doesn't really fit as a tag.
That's correct. Yeah. So tags are just lists. Tags are just like, it's just represented as a list of strings, really. The metadata is useful when you want to send things up that are related to your application. So if you have like a mobile application ID, if you have a correlation ID, if you want to assign like a user ID, like to your traces as well, you can use that.
Nice.
Cool. So you can unnest the runs a bit here. So in this case, you can see that this agent executor called an LM chain, which called a tool, which called another LM chain. You can also click into a run, any row, and that will take you to a run details page. This page has all of the information that's related to this specific run. In this case, this is an agent executor run. You can see like the input tokens and the output tokens. If you hover over it, you'll see like the total tokens. You'll see the latency, the fact that it's a chain, the tag, the input, the output. You're able to copy these. We have some metadata that we send up as well. In this case, we're sending like the runtime metadata, so the library version, the platform, Python, runtime information, SDK version, etc. You can go through the run tree to click on different sections of the run. So as you'll see, the agent executor called an LLM chain, which then called a chat model. In this case, we're using Chat OpenAI. You can see metadata for every step of the run. So in this case, we have some extra metadata about the chat model. So we have the model name. We have some other invocation params like request timeout n. We also have the stop sequences that were sent. And we also actually send up the serialized manifest. So this is useful if you want to see exactly how the model was constructed. Cool. For select chat models and LLMs, we allow you to open the run in a playground environment. And here you can see that this is totally configurable and editable. So we currently support this for Chat OpenAI, chat models, Anthropic chat model, and the regular OpenAI model. You can change the model. You can change the temperature. You can change the prompt. You can click submit. And then you'll see that you get a result. I'll just make some edits here to show you that you can actually edit this. Yeah, this allows you to play around with the LLM parts of your of your chains. So you can easily inspect the raw prompt that was sent to the foundation model API. Sometimes it's hard to see or hard to understand if you're using a chain, like how the actual finalized prompt or like how the final prompt what it looks like under the hood, because there are a lot of things going on before before the final prompt is assembled. So this is helpful to allow you to see that and experiment.
Yeah, that's nice. And let's see some questions maybe on this one. So that, yeah, could I see the metadata again, maybe? Yeah, okay, so this is helping you understand like how you're using your external model API.
Yeah.
Is this generic in a way that, like, let's say I set up my own Llama 2 model and it's available via an API, would those kinds of invocations get picked up, or what? Like, is there a way I can, like, write a little bit of my own code to make sure that it hooks into this metadata collection?
Yeah, so the invocation params will vary per model type.
Hmm.
And so the invocation params that are specific to Llama will get sent up. A lot of them are common among the chat models and LLMs. If you want to send up your own metadata, you can, you can use like the functionality that I described earlier with sending up extra, arbitrary key value pairs, and that will show up in the metadata section as well.
Got it. Okay. And for the, like, going back to that run page where we could see like the kind of trace of the execution. Yeah, I really like, yeah, being able to see these kinds of traces is really helpful when you have like a dynamic, something that's like, yeah, as dynamic as LangChain tool use, where just looking at the code doesn't tell you what like actually happens. This seems like super valuable and helpful. Curious, like, what cool things have you found with this run tree besides like, we like the LM math chain examples, pretty straightforward. What are some other things you found with this run tree that it's, interesting things it's uncovered that you weren't expecting, or interesting behaviors?
Yeah, I mean, Will and Harrison also feel free to chime in here, but I think, yeah, it's when you have an agent and it's like, and you're iterating on it, and it takes longer than expected, or it's running into like an infinite loop problem and getting tripped up. It's really hard to pinpoint exactly like which step things went wrong. And so being able to look at the inputs and outputs of every step of the execution lets you better isolate the problem. And then coming back to like what I discussed, earlier, it's hard to like get a good grasp on what exactly the prompt is that's going to the foundation model. Like there are a lot of there are a lot of things that happen under the hood in chains and agents. So this allows you to debug on the LLM level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned debugging, testing, monitoring, and evaluating, right? Yeah. So this feels like really great stuff for the debugging.
I think like the biggest thing, I think it also really just helps give an understanding of like what's actually going on under the hood and like which calls are being made and in which sequence. So like, even for something that's not an agent, like the conversational retrieval QA chain, you've got like some reframing of the question that can then get sent to a retriever, and then you've got those results combined with the original question and the chat history passed in. And so just seeing that sequence is nice. And then another thing that I've actually used it for is like there are a bunch of libraries written on top of LangChain. So like one of these is like the code interpreter kind of like project that I think we tweeted about on like Sunday. And I had no clue what like prompts it was using or what it was even doing under the hood. But because it was using LangChain, I just turned on kind of like the logging aspect, and then I could see all of that pretty easily. And so I think it's also like, it just helps kind of like shed the lights as you've got these wrappers that are getting larger and larger and more interesting, like what actually are the prompts that are being used? What is the sequence of calls that are being made? Those are just, whether it's in LangChain or packages on top of LangChain, I've found that like just pretty interesting and fun and insightful to look at.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Like you can use LangSmith with frameworks that are built on LangChain as well. So if you configure your environment, you'll get traces for LangChain as well, even if you're not using LangChain directly, if you're using it indirectly. So nice. The other things I'll point out here is you can you can rate a run. So you can mark a run as correct, incorrect. That will show up as a feedback key value pair. And I'll get into feedback in more detail in just a minute. But you'll see feedback for your runs in the feedback section here. You can, I already went through opening in the playground. You can also share your run publicly. So if you find a particular trace interesting. In this case, I actually just shared the OpenAI run, but I can share like the full agent run as well. And so, we've actually added a Discord channel. I forget what it's called. It's like share your like interesting, cool LangSmith traces. So, would love to see, what you all are building, and see your traces here. And if you find something that's hard to debug, you can share your trace. This is what it looks like to the public, and yeah, you'll be able to see each step of the trace even when it's shared. Cool.
It's like Strava, but for your LangChain runs.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
And it's also useful, for debugging and
collaborative debugging. Yeah.
For making a contribution to
Totally. Yeah. So if you're having a hard time, debugging one of your LangChain agents or chains, you can click share run. You can share in Discord. I'm sure someone will have some insight. If you're working on something particularly fun and you want to share that as well, or something funny, like if an agent goes like terribly wrong and it's just like infinite looping, and it's spitting out a bunch of garbage, like that's also fun to see. So we don't discriminate. Cool. One other feature I'll highlight, and this will kind of take us to the testing and evaluation set of features for LangSmith, is adding to a data set. So for any run, you can add the inputs and outputs as an example to a data set. So a data set is meant to be a series of ground truth. It's meant to contain a series of ground truth examples you can use to benchmark other chains and agents. So I can create a new data set. A name will be auto-generated. I can type in a description if I want to. I can click submit, and then this will get saved as that particular as an example in that data set. I'll actually switch back over to the notebook, and I'll walk through what this workflow looks like end to end. Okay, so what we're going to do in this section is set up another agent. In this case, we're going to set up an agent that uses the function calling capability, the function calling models that came out not too long ago. And we'll compare, how it did to the initial agent that we set up, which was not using the function calling model. So you can create a data set in the UI. You can also create a data set using the client, which I'm doing here. So in this case, I'll create a data set called calculator example data set with the same unique identifier that I suffix to the project name. I'll add a description to it. What I'm doing here is I'm using the client to collect the runs for the project that I specified. So this is going to list all of the runs that I logged earlier in this webinar. And then what I'll do is, what this line is doing is it's creating examples from all of those runs. So it's taking the inputs and the outputs of those runs and then adding them as examples to the data set that I just created. In a real world example, before you mark these as ground truth examples, you'll probably want to validate them. This is meant to be just a simple walkthrough example.
Yeah. Could I put, like, if they're calculator ones, maybe I would like calculate it in Python. Could I like return just like a dictionary type thing, or
totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you can manually create examples as well. You don't have to create examples from runs. So you can create examples as just so we have 3 different types of data sets. We have data sets meant to be run over LLMs. We have data sets specifically for chat models that store things in message format. And then we have arbitrary key value data sets, which just have a collection of inputs and outputs. So it's very flexible. Cool. Configure this. Okay. So what I'm doing here is setting up evaluators to evaluate the runs that I'm about to kick off on the data set that I just created. So we have different types of evaluators that are that you can use off the shelf with LangSmith. We have we have correctness evaluators. We have evaluators that use embedding distance. We have arbitrary. We have criteria evaluators that take in arbitrary criteria, and we also allow you to create custom evaluators. And maybe if we have time, Will can jump in and show you how custom evaluators work as well. So here I'm just going to configure the evaluators I'm going to use. And then I'm going to run the agent on the data set that I created, and then go back to LangSmith to see what it looks like. Cool. Okay. So let's just take a second. You'll see that another project spun up, and this is actually the project that has the traces for the evaluation chains that are running, which is kind of cool. I'll go to datasets actually, and you can see the examples that I created in this dataset. So these are just examples that are taken from the the run inputs and outputs. You'll see test runs as well. These test runs are runs that were triggered or run over the examples in the dataset. So if you remember in the notebook, I used a run on dataset. This is the async version of run on dataset. And I've I added the dataset name, the agent factory. This is like the function that's used to configure agent, the evaluation config. This is the configuration that specifies which evaluators you want to run, and any tags as well. And the errors that you see here are not errors related to LangSmith. They're errors related to the agent execution. So the agent doesn't always get things right. These are logged as warnings. Agents can make mistakes, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Awesome. So it looks like everything finished up here. So let's dive into this in a bit more detail. You'll see that the runs that error don't get evaluated, and that's on purpose, but that's also configurable. Okay, so this is the run details page of a run that was triggered run on an example. So in addition to the input and output that you saw previously, you also have this reference output. This reference output was the output from the example. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. I recognize that. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. In addition to the reference output, you also have this header that says, this run was created or run with this example, and you can look at the example. This is the example detail page, and you can look at the runs. In this case, there's only one run, but imagine if I did run over dataset twice, you'll see multiple runs or 2 runs associated with this example. Cool. And then you'll see a bunch of feedback, which gets into the fun part. So remember all those evaluators that I configured earlier? Well, those were used to assign feedback to the run that was triggered on the example. So I configured a correctness evaluator, an embedding cosine distance evaluator, a helpfulness evaluator, and a fifth grader score evaluator. And so if I want to dive deeper into exactly what's going on into these evaluator chains, I can click on this link, and then I can see the chain that was used to evaluate the run. So this is actually the raw prompt that was sent to the the chat OpenAI model. In this case, we're using GPT-4, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You can see how the prompt was formatted from the criteria eval chain, and you can see the output. And this output was parsed, and it was then used to assign a feedback score to the run.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense so far?
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's cool. Yeah, that you can mix language model powered evaluations with maybe deterministic evaluations with.
Yeah, so we made this intentionally flexible. At some point, we're going to also allow you to run evaluators directly from the UI. But for now, you can run them, in Python. One other thing I'll point out is, so if you click on any data set and you click on New Test Run, it will give you the code you need to run the evaluator. So what you need to do is just replace this with your own chain or agent. And then if you click on, if I want to evaluate on correctness, conciseness, relevance, you can see the code updating to tell you how to configure your run eval config. And then you do the same thing as I did in the notebook, which you can use the async version, you can use the sync version, run on dataset, and then you can see feedback show up immediately in LangSmith.
Nice.
Cool. All right. Anything else that'd be useful to touch on? Maybe the exporting features. Yeah. So another interesting thing or another useful feature is you're able to download data sets in two different formats, in CSV format and an OpenAI JSON-L format. So you can use data sets that you've created in LangSmith with the OpenAI evals library. We also have examples in the documentation of how to export not only data sets but also runs. So we have we have an example that uses that shows you how to export runs. So you can use them with context, which is it's a monitoring framework that you can use to get a better understanding of what's going on in your LLM applications.
And that I can pull the data sets down and the runs down with like the SDK, the LangSmith SDK?
Yes, you can. Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Cool. All right. Anything else that you wanted to showcase?
That touches on most of them. And the end of the notebook includes a little snippet about like fetching runs. And
That's true.
So to address that question there.
Yeah. So
a simple example. There's more examples in the docs.
Yeah, totally. There are more examples in the docs. We actually already, earlier in the notebook, I actually already pulled down runs for my project when I was creating the data set. So this is what the list runs method the client does. This is also completely configurable. So we actually allow you to use the same query language that is present, that's present in the UI. So you can query for different tags, and you can sort of see how this works. We have plenty of examples in the documentation for this as well.
Cool. Yeah, I can bring in some questions that have been coming in the Q&A.
Totally.
Yeah. So, really a great question that you want to hear. How do we get an invite code? How do we use it?
So we'll be pretty liberal with the with the waitlist. It's been great to see like all the interest. We have a couple of forums on the waitlist splash page that I want to draw attention to. So one is for the OSS community and for open source LangChain open source contributors. So if you're fall into one of those two buckets, we have a waitlist form for you, so you can get expedited access, and we'll be checking that pretty frequently. We also have a waitlist specifically for enterprise users. So if you're building with LLMs at companies and trying to put things into production, we want to hear from you, and would love to give you access as well. We've had a lot of great input already from some of our early design partners, and want to keep that feedback channel going.
Awesome. Yeah. Maybe if you have links to those, if Harrison or Nick share those in the chat here on Crowdcast.
Yep.
You kind of answered this one a little bit with that public link sharing. What if I want like my team to collaborate on a project? What are there options available there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So supporting teams is on our roadmap, and we're going to address that pretty soon. Yeah.
Got it. But you have that share public links if you're willing to put that.
Now, yeah, for now, the best way to collaborate without sharing a login is to share runs.
Another interesting question. So, tool use and agents is a popular use of LangChain. The classic one though is like, retrieval augmented generation. So to what extent is retrieval augmented or like, integration with vector stores and things like that part of LangSmith? Like, does that show up in the runs or, yeah?
Yeah, so we actually already have integration with our retriever abstraction. So retriever runs show up in LangSmith. Regarding your other questions about search scores, do we have anything on? I don't think so.
Those don't show up apparently, but I think it's definitely something we would like to build out.
Yeah. So we definitely want to add more metadata along with the retriever runs. So definitely on our roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I'll mention is we want to support embeddings as well. So that's soon on our roadmap.
Like storing embeddings in LangSmith, you mean?
Logging runs related to embedding. So basically, like if you as part of your retrieval augmented generation pipeline, if you call like one of our embedding models, we want to log events for those as well.
Got it. I see. There were a couple questions kind of in this theme, which is like, to what extent is there like low code, no code type stuff in LangSmith? So like, it looked like with the evaluators, you could kind of create them via the UI, but otherwise you're mostly like writing code in LangChain or in your preferred framework and sending it to LangSmith. So code first.
That's correct. Yeah. So it's meant to integrate seamlessly with LangChain. As you saw, you just have to configure a few environment variables. And if you're not using LangChain, we also offer an SDK that you can use, and we have like a lower level run tree API that you can use to assemble and log traces directly. There are some no-code. I mean, there's like LangFlow is built on LangChain, and so if you yeah, exactly. As someone in the chat already commented on LangFlow, and so if you configured your LangChain environment correctly, I believe like runs that you execute in LangFlow should also show up. I haven't tried it, but that's the way it works. Yeah.
Cool. There's also been some questions about like our like local Docker on-prem, like alternative ways of running this. Are those going to be like options with LangSmith?
Yeah. So we right now the main way to use LangSmith is through the hosted platform. If you're a company that's building with LLMs and on-premise deployment is a blocker, then we can definitely chat.
Mm-hmm. There like a couple questions wanted a little bit more about like, okay, if I don't use LangChain to run things, like what does the run UI show? And kind of like, how do you integrate with that? Because there were also questions about, if I'm using an open language model, I'm doing it that way, like how do I get the same benefits of logging stuff to LangSmith?
So the question is like if you're using different types of models, or if you're not using LangChain.
Yeah, I guess both of them. They're both sort of like, we saw the path of like, I'm using LangChain and I'm calling the OpenAI API. Like what happens when I don't do those things?
Totally. Yeah. So the runs show up the same way, right? So we have runs that are tagged as either, we have distinct categories. We have chain runs, we have tool runs, we have LLM runs. And retriever runs, and we're going to add embedding runs very soon. It doesn't matter which provider you're using, or which specifically, if you're using LangChain, it doesn't matter which model wrapper you're using, right? You could be using the Anthropic wrapper. You could be using, you could be using really anything, and it will show up the same way. If you're not using LangChain and you're using the SDK to log runs, it shows up in the exact same way. So the runs are still grouped into those distinct categories, and they're nested depending on, if you're using LangChain, the nesting is kind of taken care of for you, because this works through our callback mechanism. And so we keep track of the ordering and the nesting as the run is executing in LangChain. If you're not using LangChain, you kind of have to do some extra work to make sure that the the runs are being sent up in the correct order and nesting. So it's kind of like it's almost like you're manipulating the DOM using JavaScript. It's like a very similar API where you're like really creating a root run, and then you're appending children to it. And we have some examples in the documentation. So.
Yeah. So it's this run tree abstraction is where you would hook in from other things, and then it would be you construct that thing and send it via the SDK. So that's exactly what you want to
Yep. And if there are suggestions on how to make this a smoother experience, we're all ears.
Cool. Another popular question. So as you said, the way to use LangSmith right now is this hosted version from y'all. So what's the pricing situation on this hosted tool?
There's no charge. It's beta software. We don't charge for beta software. So yeah.
Got it. Cool. Let's see. The evaluation stuff is really cool. It's exciting to see. You showed an integration through the JSON-L format that allows you to use things from OpenAI. There were so there's some interest definitely also from people to hear more about those evaluation capabilities. Could you run them against academic benchmarks? Do you have maybe implementations of those academic benchmarks, or would we go through the OpenAI evals API to do that, or evals library to do that?
So we allow you to upload arbitrary data sets to the platform, which can help alleviate some of these. I guess it can help answer some of these questions. So we currently allow you to upload arbitrary data in CSV format. We also want to add, so basically if there's a CSV data set that you really like and you want to evaluate against, you can do it, you can use that. We also want to support soon JSON-L format for uploading. So we offer that for exporting. But if there's a data set in OpenAI evals that you really like, we want to make sure that you can use it in LangSmith as well. Will and Harrison, if you have other thoughts, feel free to chime in here. But yeah, we want to make this as flexible and open as possible, and we want to make it work with whatever evaluation mechanism you want to use.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that I think this is really focused on helping you create kind of custom evaluators for your data and do that. Basically, what we see is that when you're working on your own application, and part of the power of LLMs is they can power so many different applications. Generic stuff is not amazingly useful. You want to test it on your own data. You want your own evaluation metrics. We'll work on creating a big library of those, but I think first and foremost, we want to make it really easy for people to just do it on their own stuff, because I think that's the most surefire way we've seen. So,
what about human feedback? I saw that there was I saw the rating a run thing via the UI. Is there a way to kick off annotators as an evaluator, or is it you'd want your annotators kind of going in and maybe uploading their stuff from Label Studio into LangSmith? Do you have any thoughts on the flow there for human labels?
Totally. So yeah, that is supported 100%. And a really common developer workflow we've seen is attaching, if you're building a chat agent or a chat bot, and you add a feedback button to your outputs, you can actually hook that up to LangSmith. so that you can send that feedback to the system, and then you can like filter your runs on that feedback. So you can assign like a specific feedback key, like app user feedback or whatever you want to call it. You can filter on that feedback key, and you can filter for specific feedback values as well. Like give me runs that have a feedback value of 1, right? If you're using like in the simplest form, like 0, 1 feedback, right? And then you can add these runs, you can bulk export them to a data set. So you can have this like evolving sort of data set where you can use to evaluate newer versions of your application. You can use them, you can download them, you can use them in few shot prompts. Maybe you can also use them in like fine tuning if it's like LLM data as well. So, yeah,
and does that feedback, do I need that to be available at the time that I'm like before the run finishes, or is it something I could kind of like join later?
Yeah, you can do it at whatever point. You just need the run ID. So we actually offer a mechanism to like if you're using LangChain, you can grab the run ID after the run completes. It's actually returned as part of the result. We could in Python you pass in a flag that says return run metadata, I believe. I can double check that and link to the documentations offline. And in JavaScript, I believe it's just returned automatically. And so you grab that ID, and then you can use the SDK to assign feedback to that run. If you have a run that's been executed like a while ago, right? You can use like the list runs method of the client. You can grab you can grab a set of run IDs, and you can like annotate them that way as well.
Cool. And so at the beginning, we started with looking at the logging runs and looking at those trees and traces and the playground. That's like the debugging kind of side of things. The saving the data sets is great for the evaluation component and also for kind of like testing. I can imagine building like my CI/CD for my language models out of logged data sets. One thing that I don't think is clear to me is like the like monitoring stuff, where it's sort of like looking at the state of an application,
Yes.
or like looking for, say, like user misbehavior. So like, could you tell us a little bit more about how monitoring is supported with LangSmith?
Totally. So we have like a basic version of monitoring that we support right now, which is being able to track latency, being able to track tokens which are associated with the costs, being able to track feedback for your runs, being able to filter on all of those things, get counts for different like runs that use more than like 1,000 tokens, runs that take longer than 30 seconds. So we support all of that right now. We do definitely want to offer a better monitoring experience. So we want to provide even more analytics about your runs. We want to provide time series data, so you can like track costs and metrics over time. If they're arbitrary, if there are things that you want to arbitrary like metadata that you want to send up with your runs as well, we're already tracking those, but giving you a better view of how that data shifts like over time could also be useful. So we don't have all the answers right now, but we know that like better tracking, especially like on the time axis, is missing, and that's obviously something that we want to add very soon.
Got it. Yeah, so that's like time series, the kind of things you might see in like Grafana or something, where it's like metrics over time, aggregation queries and their results, like histograms. Definitely seeing token counts, being able to query on them. That's really great for kind of like live figuring out a problem or like putting out a fire. Would you love to be able to like kind of take this stuff and like build dashboards out of it? For the like data doggy kind of experience.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. Looking, I think we answered most of the like broad themed questions. So this is a question somebody want to follow up on monitoring. What about like integrating this with Prometheus? Sounds like maybe this person would like to, maybe put all their Prometheus metrics into LangSmith.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and we've heard that from a few others as well. To be honest, we don't have a great idea of like what data we want to allow into LangSmith. Like, I think we want to be fairly structured and opinionated on like what we, how we log things to LangSmith. However, when it comes to exporting data from LangSmith to other platforms, that's where we want to be like super flexible. So if you want to like export runs to your own data warehouse, if you're already using your own BI tool and you don't want to, if you don't want another set of charts that you want to look at, right? We want to make this as seamless of an experience as possible, and not disrupt your workflow. So I guess maybe higher level answer to the question. Exporting, we want to support all the things. Logging, we'll be a little bit more selective about, but if there are big use cases that we're missing, we'd love to hear about those.
Yeah, some questions here. Saw a good one. Oh yeah, so like you have your data sets, you can run evaluations against it, and you get those like numbers. Then maybe you want to get like a high level answer of like what was the like average value on that 5th grader evaluation, or something like that. So it looked like it would be easy in what you showed to like find a particular example and be like, why did I get a 0 on my helpfulness on this particular example? But what about kind of seeing like how overall one model did relative to another one, like a model leaderboard, as Nicholas asked about.
Yeah. So we already aggregate feedback stats per run, right? So yeah, I guess we do like, okay, so if you want to compare, this kind of gets into tracking like specific chains, specific models, and like seeing how they stack up in terms of like feedback or other metrics. To be honest, we can support that right now just by using like different projects for each configuration of your chain or model. But tracking like on a specific instance of a model is something that's on our roadmap. Yeah. Did that sort of answer the question, or was it completely off the?
Yeah, go ahead.
But the data set page, because you have the touchdowns there, but yeah, on the model level across data sets is something that's a view that we still have to build up. Yeah,
that's a view that's still in the works.
But I can see like I have one run that was like not just a single like question answer pair, but like all the question answer pairs grouped together.
Yeah.
And I can look at that at a high level aggregated metric compared to another one and be like, okay, like my my code coverage for my test did not go down. My eval on our like Q&A eval set in LangSmith went up. So we're ready to PR this.
Yep.
Cool. All right, I think we covered most of the kind of broad themes for questions. So yeah, thanks for walking me through LangSmith, and it looks like a pretty useful tool.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Charles. Really appreciate you helping out with this webinar.
Thanks for joining, Charles. Always fun.
Right.
Also, some folks were asking about like links for the notebook, for the docs, stuff like that. So maybe toss those into the chat before we go, so that people can find them and try it out.
Yep, I'm gonna link a bunch of things right now.
Cool. All right. See ya.
Yep.